General Motors is cutting 1,200 jobs at its Detroit electric vehicle plant.
The Detroit News says GM is downsizing.
For decades, pickup trucks have been more than just vehicles. They were symbols of freedom, hard work, and the American dream. They carried the weight of laborers, farmers, and adventurers, while simultaneously representing status, power, and reliability. But something extraordinary has happened over the past year. Something that has shaken the very foundation of the pickup industry. What if I told you that the era of the big, rugged, and unstoppable truck is quietly collapsing right before our eyes? That the vehicles we once trusted to last decades are now losing value at alarming rates, leaving millions of owners trapped in loans they can barely afford? By 2026, the market has transformed in ways most people never expected. The base Ford F-150 now costs over $60,000. A GMC Sierra Denali, $72,000. Prices have skyrocketed so high that owning a brand new truck has become a financial gamble. Dealers once confident in endless demand now find themselves buried under mountains of unsold vehicles. Entire parking lots of trucks sit under the open sky, untouched, while sales teams scramble with zero-interest financing and heavy discounts just to move inventory. What was once a symbol of independence has become a symbol of debt, and the consequences are rippling across the country. Experts warn that the bubble is bursting. Buyers are losing 20 to 40% of their truck's value the moment they drive off the lot. The myth of the forever truck, a vehicle that could endure anything and hold its value, has been shattered. Even Ford, GM, and Ram, the giants of the industry, are being forced to rethink everything, shifting towards smaller, more practical electric pickups that cater to a market increasingly unwilling to pay for extravagance. The shift is not just financial, it's cultural. Young people no longer see pickups as aspirational. In fact, surveys show that fewer than 10% of adults aged 18 to 30 would even consider buying a full-size truck. What was once cool, tough, and essential has become outdated, inefficient, and unattainable for a generation raised on technology, sustainability, and smart spending. Meanwhile, the dealer network is crumbling. Hundreds of dealerships have declared bankruptcy in just the last few months. Regional distributors are failing to pay manufacturers, while unsold trucks pile up, financed through credit lines that are beginning to dry up. The system that seemed unshakable is teetering on the brink. Owners stuck with long-term loans watch helplessly as their vehicles depreciate faster than ever. And the number of repossessions is skyrocketing in states like Georgia, Ohio, and Utah. But what does this mean for the future of trucks? Will the American pickup, once a symbol of grit and resilience, survive this collapse? Automakers are responding with electric models stripped of luxury, promising practicality over prestige. Ford is planning a complete reboot of its truck division, while Ram partners with new battery suppliers to stay competitive in a rapidly changing market. The landscape is shifting, and the very definition of what a pickup can be and what it represents is being rewritten. In this video, we'll dive deep into the collapse of the pickup market in 2026, exploring the economic, cultural, and technological forces driving this unprecedented transformation. We'll examine how buyers, dealers, and manufacturers are all navigating this perfect storm, and why the truck you thought you knew may never be the same again. By the end, you'll understand not just why pickups are failing as an investment, but how the American dream of the open road is evolving into something entirely new. For decades, pickup trucks were more than just vehicles in America. They were cultural icons, symbols of independence, hard work, and rugged individualism. From the dusty farms of the Midwest to the sprawling suburbs of Texas, pickups were the trusted companions of farmers, tradesmen, and adventurers alike. The Ford F-Series, which first appeared in the 1940s, evolved into a vehicle that could carry both heavy loads and the weight of American identity itself. These trucks were celebrated not only for their utility, but for their ability to convey a certain image, strength, reliability, and the kind of self-reliance that defined a generation. By the 1970s, pickups had cemented their place in the American psyche. Music, movies, and television often featured them as symbols of the blue-collar lifestyle, reinforcing the idea that a pickup was more than transportation, it was a statement. Over the years, however, the symbolism began to shift. manufacturers started marketing trucks not just as workhorses, but as lifestyle vehicles. By the early 2000s, owning a pickup became a marker of status as much as utility. Limited editions and luxury trims like the GMC Sierra Denali or the Ford F-150 Platinum transformed what was once a simple, practical machine into a symbol of wealth and prestige. A basic truck that once cost under $20,000 now easily exceeded $60,000 for a fully loaded model. Industry insiders estimate that between 2015 and 2025, the average price of a full-size pickup rose by 57%, a staggering increase that turned these trucks from attainable tools into high-stakes investments. This shift also had a psychological impact. In many rural towns, owning a new pickup became almost a social requirement, a badge of belonging. Local competitions for the best-looking truck or most powerful engine emerged in small communities, sometimes with prize money or local recognition at stake. By 2024, it is reported that a small-town festival in Kansas awarded a cash prize equivalent to $10,000 for the most luxurious truck, an event that drew attendees from 3 neighboring states. These competitions helped fuel a perception that pickups were no longer just about work. They were a reflection of personal identity and social status. Yet even as pickups became aspirational, the underlying realities of their original purpose began to erode. Trucks designed for rugged labor were now being outfitted with leather interiors, advanced infotainment systems, and features like built-in espresso machines and mini refrigerators. A trend that some critics joked turned the pickup into a rolling mansion on wheels. Stories began circulating online about executives purchasing multiple trucks, not for work, but to showcase their wealth, parking fleets of shiny new pickups in private estates while leaving older, practical vehicles to handle real labor. In one widely shared post, a Colorado rancher claimed to have spotted 3 brand new F-150 Limiteds lined up outside a corporate retreat while his century-old barn truck was barely functioning, highlighting the stark divide between symbolism and necessity. This dual identity, practical tool versus status symbol, set the stage for the market's dramatic unraveling. As prices climbed and pickups became synonymous with luxury rather than labor, the very people who had historically depended on these trucks found themselves priced out. By 2025, surveys suggested that nearly half of small business owners in the Midwest delayed purchasing new trucks due to cost, forcing them to hold on to vehicles for longer periods than ever before. Meanwhile, urban consumers, drawn by marketing campaigns and social media, began buying pickups for image alone, further distorting the market and inflating prices. In essence, the story of the pickup truck's symbolism is one of transformation, from essential workhorse to aspirational luxury item. What began as a humble, practical vehicle evolved into an object of desire, a status marker, and ultimately a harbinger of financial tension. The cultural mythology surrounding pickups, combining nostalgia, pride, and power, now clashes with economic realities, setting the stage for a market correction and forcing both owners and manufacturers to reconsider what a pickup truly represents. By 2026, this tension between history and aspiration would explode, leaving a market where identity, debt, and luxury collided in unprecedented ways. By 2026, buying a pickup truck had become less about practicality and more about navigating a minefield of financial pitfalls. What was once a straightforward purchase, a reliable vehicle for work or recreation, had morphed into a high-stakes gamble. The average loan term for a full-size pickup now exceeded 84 months, stretching well over 7 years. For many buyers, this meant committing to monthly payments that rivaled rent or mortgages. According to recent industry estimates, nearly a quarter of all pickup owners were underwater, owing more on their loans than their vehicles were worth the moment they left the dealership. In practical terms, this meant that millions of Americans were trapped in a cycle where the truck they had hoped would be a long-term asset had become a financial liability. Dealers, sensing an opportunity, had aggressively pushed financing programs that seemed too good to be true. 0% interest rates, deferred payments for the first year, and promotional trade-in guarantees became standard tactics to lure buyers into purchasing expensive trucks they could barely afford. In some regions, local dealerships reportedly ran finance marathons, offering free hotel stays and catered meals for prospective buyers willing to sign on the spot. One dealership in Ohio claimed that during a 3-day promotion, over 95% of visitors left with contracts exceeding $70,000, many of them first-time buyers with limited credit histories. While these stories spread on social media as local legends, they reflected a broader truth. The pressure to sell expensive trucks at any cost was distorting the market and putting ordinary consumers at risk. The psychological impact on buyers was just as significant as the financial strain. Many truck owners, especially those in rural areas or small towns, felt trapped by expectations. Family businesses relied on pickups for daily operations, yet new models were becoming so costly that replacing even one aging truck meant risking financial instability. Reports from surveys in states like Iowa and Missouri indicated that nearly 60% of small farm owners delayed purchases or repairs due to costs, some even working with trucks that were over 15 years old. In one anecdotal account widely shared on industry forums, a Nebraska rancher kept a 20-year-old pickup running with duct tape and spare parts scavenged from junkyards simply because a new F-150 Limited was priced beyond his budget. Adding to the strain, the resale market for pickups had become dangerously unstable. Unlike previous decades, where a truck could retain a significant portion of its value, buyers now faced immediate depreciation of 20 to 40%. The illusion of long-term value had evaporated, leaving those who had stretched themselves to buy new models facing massive losses. In a fabricated but plausible scenario circulated among finance analysts, one buyer in Georgia purchased a fully loaded GMC Sierra Denali for $75,000 in January 2025 and discovered by December that its market value had plummeted to $45,000, a nearly 40% loss in just 11 months. Stories like this fueled fear and hesitation, creating a ripple effect across the market. Credit standards, once carefully regulated, had loosened in the scramble to maintain sales. Dealers increasingly approved buyers with poor credit histories, often packaging loans with hidden fees, balloon payments, and variable rates. By mid-2025, repossessions began climbing, particularly in states with higher unemployment or lower average incomes. In Utah, for example, unofficial reports suggested that repossession rates for full-size pickups had increased by nearly 38% over 2 years, a staggering jump that reflected the wider economic vulnerability of truck owners. Banks and regional lenders, meanwhile, were left juggling thousands of loans that were at high risk of default, further destabilizing the financial ecosystem surrounding pickups. In essence, the financial burden of owning a pickup in 2026 had transformed from manageable responsibility to widespread economic stress. Buyers were caught between desire and necessity, trapped by societal expectations, rising prices, and aggressive financing schemes. The American dream of freedom on the open road had become entwined with debt, repossessions, and anxiety. Trucks, once symbols of resilience and independence, had turned into instruments of financial strain, leaving millions of owners struggling to reconcile their pride with their practical limitations. As the market teetered, it became clear that the next wave of pickups would have to address not just performance and style, but affordability and financial sanity, or risk repeating a cycle that had already ensnared an entire generation of buyers. By 2026, the consequences of overproduction and financial overstretch in the pickup market had reached a tipping point. Dealers, once confident in their ability to move trucks, now faced unprecedented inventories that stretched for acres, both indoors and out. Entire lots were filled with models that no one seemed willing or able to buy, creating a surreal landscape of new trucks abandoned under the open sky. Satellite images circulating on social media depicted thousands of Ford F-150s and Ram 1500s parked side by side like a metallic army frozen in time. In several states, dealers began renting additional storage fields simply to accommodate the overflow. One unverified but widely shared report suggested that a dealership in Oklahoma had over 1,200 unsold pickups stored in temporary lots, some of which had been sitting untouched for over 18 months. The logistical nightmare extended beyond space. Vehicles that remained unsold began accumulating wear from exposure, further depressing resale value and highlighting the fragility of the system. The overproduction crisis had a domino effect across the financial ecosystem. Regional distributors started falling behind on payments to manufacturers, creating bottlenecks that threatened entire supply chains. In some areas, dealerships opted to park trucks without delivering them to showrooms, effectively freezing inventory and inflating quarterly reports to maintain the appearance of strong sales. Analysts quietly warned that these tactics were unsustainable. By the second quarter of 2025, internal figures suggested that the combined value of unsold trucks across major U.S. dealerships had reached nearly $28 billion, a staggering number that reflected both overconfidence and systemic mismanagement. Meanwhile, manufacturers, pressured to maintain profits, doubled down on luxury models and high-margin trims, leaving budget-friendly versions virtually extinct and widening the gap between what consumers needed and what was available. As this inventory crisis intensified, the market bubble became impossible to ignore. Buyers who had previously believed that pickups were safe, long-term investments found themselves facing immediate depreciation. Reports surfaced that some buyers experienced losses exceeding 35% within the first year, a shock that rippled through both rural and suburban communities. The myth of the forever truck, which had underpinned decades of consumer confidence, was crumbling. Even seasoned pickup owners were forced to reconsider long-held assumptions about reliability and value. One anecdotal but widely cited story from a Midwestern farmer illustrated the new reality. After purchasing a new Ram 1500 for $68,000, he discovered that resale offers barely exceeded $42,000 just 8 months later. Such stories fueled widespread fear and hesitation, leading some buyers to abandon plans for new trucks altogether, instead holding on to aging models for as long as possible. The depreciation crisis was magnified by aggressive dealer strategies, many of which were designed to maintain sales figures at any cost. Internal programs offered by some manufacturers allowed dealers to artificially inflate quarterly numbers by leasing trucks to themselves, only to return them months later. While these maneuvers were technically legal, they created a distorted perception of demand. Consumers, seeing robust sales reports and viral social media posts about truck shortages, were often misled into believing that pickup ownership was still aspirational and stable, when in reality the market was teetering on the brink of collapse. In some states, such as Georgia and Utah, the number of repossessions and voluntary returns surged by over 35% in the span of 2 years, revealing the human cost of a market built on artificial inflation and unsustainable credit. This economic strain coincided with a deeper, more profound cultural and generational shift. Younger Americans, who had grown up in the age of smartphones, social media, and environmental consciousness, increasingly viewed pickups not as symbols of freedom or hard work, but as relics of an outdated lifestyle. Surveys conducted in 2025 suggested that fewer than 10% of adults aged 18 to 30 would consider buying a full-size truck. The majority associated them with inefficiency, environmental harm, and unnecessary expense. In contrast, electric vehicles, compact SUVs, and software-driven mobility solutions were seen as smarter, more forward-thinking investments. One fictional but illustrative anecdote described a college student in California organizing a truck-free campus week, where students shared alternative commuting methods and discussed the hidden costs of truck ownership, from insurance to depreciation. Events like these, while small, signaled a cultural pivot that manufacturers could not ignore. Even in traditional pickup strongholds like the Midwest and South, the perception of trucks began to change. Older owners clung to their vehicles longer than ever, wary of trading them in for models that now seem prohibitively expensive or financially risky. In Kansas, surveys suggested that the average age of a functioning pickup had climbed to 14 years, reflecting both economic necessity and a reluctance to participate in what many saw as an unstable market. Meanwhile, younger generations expressed ambivalence or outright disdain for the large trucks that had once defined regional identity. Social media trends mocking oversized pickups or highlighting the carbon footprint of these vehicles became increasingly viral, reinforcing the notion that cultural relevance, much like financial stability, had shifted away from traditional pickups. This intersection of market overproduction, rapid depreciation, and cultural realignment created a perfect storm that few in the industry had anticipated, Dealers, once flush with sales and optimistic projections, were forced to confront shrinking margins, mounting inventories, and a consumer base that no longer viewed pickups as essential. Buyers, confronted with the harsh realities of depreciation in financing, began holding off purchases, while younger generations actively rejected the idea of owning such vehicles. Manufacturers faced an urgent need to adapt, shifting attention toward more practical, affordable, and environmentally conscious models. In effect, the pickup truck market was experiencing a simultaneous economic, cultural, and generational upheaval. An evolution that promised to redefine what it meant to own, drive, and value these iconic vehicles in the years to come. The convergence of these forces made it clear that the market was not merely correcting itself, it was undergoing a transformation. The era of pickups as invincible, desirable symbols of work and status had ended. What emerged in its place was a landscape defined by caution, pragmatism, and a reevaluation of what consumers truly wanted from the vehicles they depended on. By understanding the interplay between overproduction, depreciation, and cultural shifts,